Peppa Pig, the big tale of little Peppa. Once upon a time, Peppa's best friend, Susie Sheep, came to play. "I've got something to show you," said Susie. "Look, it's me," said Susie. "You're not a baby, Susie," said Peppa, shaking her head. "This is an old photo," Susie explained. "It was taken when I was little." Peppa snorted. Susie was being very silly today. Susie pointed at Peppa. "In the olden days, you were a baby too," she said. "No, I wasn't," said Peppa. "Yes, you were," insisted Susie. "Ask your mummy." Peppa and Susie raced inside. Mummy Pig was working on the computer. "Mummy," cried Peppa, "Susie is making up stories." "No, I'm not," Susie said crossly. Peppa told Mummy Pig about Susie's silly idea that they used to be babies. "But you were a baby, Peppa," said Mummy Pig. Mummy Pig took a look on the computer. "Who do you think this is, Peppa?" Mummy Pig asked. Peppa thought that the baby looked a bit like her cousin. "Is it baby Alexander?" she asked. "No," replied Mummy Pig. "That's you as a baby, Peppa." Susie and Peppa giggled. They'd never seen baby Peppa before. George and Daddy Pig came in to see what all the fuss was about. "Look, Daddy," said Peppa, "that's me as a baby." "I remember it," said Daddy Pig. "That photo was taken on the first day in this house." "What do you mean?" asked Peppa. Daddy Pig told Peppa, Susie and George that they had moved into their house when Peppa was very little. "We brought all our things on top of our car," he said. "Mummy Pig put some pictures up," said Daddy Pig. "Daddy Pig put up a shelf," said Mummy Pig. "And Grandpa Pig made us a lovely flower garden," she continued. Peppa and Susie went outside to see what Grandpa Pig's lovely flower garden looked like now. It had completely disappeared. "Daddy Pig looked after our flower garden," said Mummy Pig. Said Daddy Pig. "We had the wrong kind of soil for flowers." "Was Susie my friend in the olden days?" asked Peppa. Daddy Pig nodded. "Of course," he said. "You and Susie have always been best friends." Peppa wondered what game she played with Susie when they were little. "Did we jump up and down in muddy puddles?" "No, Peppa," laughed Mummy Pig. "You were babies. You couldn't even walk." "What did we do when we were babies, Mrs. Pig?" asked Susie. "You cried, you burped, and you laughed." Susie and Peppa burst out laughing. "Baby Peppa, baby Susie." "Then you grew into toddlers," said Mummy Pig. "But where was George?" Peppa asked. "He was a baby in my tummy," said Mummy Pig. George looked very surprised at this part of the story. What a funny idea. Peppa thought for a minute. Daddy's tummy was even bigger than Mummy's. "Is there a baby in there?" she said. No, Peppa, chuckled Daddy Pig. This tummy is pure muscle. Mummy Pig said that after a little while, George was born, and she remembered the time that Granny and Grandpa Pig gave George a very special present. Can you guess what it was, Peppa? Peppa knew straight away. Mr. Dinosaur! She cried. Daddy Pig explained that Peppa and Susie didn't stay little for very long. They liked to jump and dance and run around all over the place. Then one day, said Mummy Pig, you saw something amazing. A muddy puddle. Mummy Pig said, you love jumping up and down in muddy puddles. After Mummy and Daddy Pig's big tale of little Peppa, Susie, George and Peppa ran outside to the garden. I still love muddy puddles. Peppa cheered and jumped into the biggest one she could find. Susie and George jumped in too. Daddy Pig went to find the camera. Let's take a photo of you now, he suggested. Peppa, Susie and George did their best smiles. Little or big, Peppa will always love jumping up and down in muddy puddles. The end. Peppa Pig, Peppa's Fairy Tale. Once upon a time, Peppa and George were looking at storybooks together. This one has 3 bears, porridge, and a hungry wolf looking for an old lady to eat, said Peppa. George looked worried. Don't worry, George, added Peppa. There's always a happy ending, sighed Peppa. I wish we lived in a fairy story. Peppa, George, called Mummy Pig. It's time to go to Granny and Grandpa Pig's house for lunch. We're going to walk there through the woods. But we want to go on a magical fairy tale adventure, said Peppa. Maybe if we look hard enough, we might see some magical things on the way, said Daddy Pig. This doesn't feel like a magical fairy tale place, said Peppa as they walked through the woods. It feels a bit magical to me, said Daddy Pig, looking at the trees around them. Yes, agreed Mummy Pig. This is like the patch in the Little Red Riding Hood. I wouldn't be surprised if we bumped into the big bad wolf, said Daddy Pig. Just then, Daddy Pig bumped straight into Mr. Wolf. Oh, hello, Mr. Wolf, said Daddy Pig. How are you? Very well, replied Mr. Wolf. I'm just a bit hungry. I'm going to my granny's house for lunch, said Peppa. Are you really? Asked Mr. Wolf. Well, I'll catch you later then. Bye. That was just like Little Red Riding Hood, gasped Peppa. Meeting Mr. Wolf in the woods. I'm not sure which way to go now, mumbled Daddy Pig. There's a little cottage over there, said Peppa. Maybe someone inside will know the way. Peppa and her family walked through a rose garden and up to the cottage. Hello, called Daddy Pig, knocking on the door. As Daddy Pig knocked, the door opened all by itself. Is there anybody home? Asked Mummy Pig, wondering who would live in a cottage in the middle of the woods. Inside the cottage there were 3 chairs and 3 bowls of porridge. That porridge looks delicious, said Daddy Pig. I wonder whose it is. Hello, Peppa, cried Belinda Bear, spotting her friend. Hello, Belinda, said Peppa. Oh, hello, Mr. and Mrs. Bear, said Mammy Pig. Sorry to trouble you, but the door just opened, so we came inside. That's quite all right, said Mrs. Bear. It's lovely to see you all. Are you going to stay for lunch, Peppa? Asked Belinda. We're just having porridge, and it's not too hot, not too cold. But just right, finished Peppa. Belinda and Peppa laughed together. We're actually on our way to have lunch at Granny and Grandpa Pig's house, said Mammy Pig. But we got a bit lost. Could you point us in the right direction, please? Mr. Bear pointed the way, and Peppa and her family set off again. Wow, said Peppa. That was just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. With a little cottage and 3 chairs, said Daddy Pig. And 3 bowls of delicious porridge. I may have had just a little spoonful. Daddy! Peppa giggled. It's like we're in a fairy tale. Peppa, George, Mammy and Daddy Pig followed the path through the woods to the bottom of a hill. I think we need more porridge to get up this hill, puffed Daddy Pig. Don't worry, Daddy, said Peppa. We're going to have lunch soon. When they arrived at the house on the top of the hill, Peppa knocked on the door. Granny, we're here. Everyone was very surprised when the door was opened by Mr. Wolf. Oh! They all gasped. Oh, hello, said Mr. Wolf. Mr. Wolf, said Peppa, why are you here? I'm just round for something to eat, replied Mr. Wolf. Granny Pig has made a lovely lunch. Granny Pig poked her head around the door. Hello, everyone, she said. Oh, hello, Granny, said Peppa, a little relieved. We're very hungry after all our walking. Don't worry, Peppa, said Granny Pig. Lunch is ready now. When Peppa stepped inside, she saw Wendy Wolf was there too. Hello, Peppa, said Wendy. What have you been doing today? Hello, Wendy, replied Peppa. We've been having a magical adventure in the fairy tale woods. Ooh, gasped Wendy. Everyone sat down to eat Granny Pig's delicious lunch. Why was it a magical adventure? Asked Wendy. It's like Goldilocks and the 3 Bears and Little Red Riding Hood, said Peppa. Wow, gasped Wendy. I love fairy stories. Everyone loved fairy stories. Yum, yum, said Mr. Wolf, tucking in. Everyone loved Granny Pig's lunch, especially hungry Mr. Wolf. The end. Peppa Pig, Peppa's Frosty Fairy Tale. Once upon a time, it was a cold and quiet winter's day. Peppa and George were playing indoors and making lots of noise. Peppa, George, called Mammy Pig, why don't you look in your box of books and pick a nice story to read? Peppa and George searched through the box and pulled out their favourite books. They giggled with excitement as they looked through the pages. Then Peppa danced all over the living room, pretending she was in a fairy tale. Snowman! Cheered George, holding his favourite book. Peppa and George loved stories. That evening, Granny and Grandpa Pig came over to stay the night. "Hello, Granny and Grandpa," said Peppa and George. "Hello, little one," said Granny Pig, giving them both a big hug. "It's time for bed now," said Mummy Pig. "Please can Granny and Grandpa tell us a bedtime story?" asked Peppa. "Of course, Peppa," said Granny Pig. "We'd love to." Once Peppa and George were tucked up in bed, Grandpa Pig showed them a beautiful snow globe. Then he began to tell a story. "Once upon a time," he said, "there was a cold and magical place called Frosty Kingdom." "How do you get to Frosty Kingdom?" asked Peppa. "First, you have to travel over the snowy hills," said Grandpa Pig. "Then you journey through a deep, dark forest. Finally, you must climb a huge mountain until you reach the winter castle at the very top." "I bet the Sugar Plum Fairy lives there and a Snow Queen," said Peppa. "Snowman," said George. Peppa and George loved Grandpa Pig's story. "I wish we could go to Frosty Kingdom too," said Peppa, as she and George drifted off to sleep. In the morning, Peppa and George woke up to the sound of jingling bells. They peered through the window to find out where the noise was coming from. "It's snowing," gasped Peppa, "and Granny and Grandpa are outside with a big sleigh and 3 reindeers." Just then, Mummy and Daddy Pig came into the bedroom. "Granny and Grandpa are taking us all on an adventure," said Mummy Pig. "We're going to Frosty Kingdom." "Frosty Kingdom was in Grandpa's story," said Peppa. "We'll be needing these," said Mummy Pig, handing out winter coats and woolly jumpers. "We're travelling by sleigh." "Hooray!" cheered Peppa and George, jumping up and down. Everyone climbed into the sleigh, and they set off. "Which way is Frosty Kingdom?" asked Daddy Pig. Grandpa Pig pointed far into the distance. "First you have to travel over the snowy hills," he began. "Then you journey through a deep dark forest," said Peppa. "Finally, you must climb a huge mountain until you reach the winter castle at the very top." "That's right, Peppa," said Grandpa Pig. After they went over the snowy hills and through the deep dark forest, they started to climb the huge mountain. "Are we nearly there yet?" asked Peppa. Suddenly George saw something move. "Snowman!" he squealed. Everyone turned to see a snowman waving at them. "Hello!" said Peppa. "We are on our way to Frosty Kingdom." Peppa and George waved goodbye, and the reindeers pulled the sleigh further up the mountain. Up the mountain they climbed, up and up and up, until the sleigh reached a clearing and the reindeer stopped. "Are we nearly there now?" asked Peppa. "I can't see the magical winter castle." "I think we may be lost," said Grandpa Pig. "I'm sure it was this way." "Oh no," Peppa sighed. "What are we going to do?" "If only there were someone here to help," said Grandpa Pig. "Hello, Peppa and George," a voice said. "Look, it's Miss Rabbit," said Peppa. "Actually, Peppa, I'm the Sugar Plum Fairy," said Miss Rabbit. "You're on the right path. Frosty Kingdom is further up the mountain." "This is so magical," cried Peppa. The sleigh climbed higher and higher once more, and was nearly at the top of the mountain when, "Welcome to Mr. Fox's official Frosty Kingdom shop," said Mr. Fox. Everyone hopped off the sleigh to take a quick look around. Daddy Pig loaded up a basket with sponges, telephones and wool. "I'm sure these will come in handy at Frosty Kingdom," he said. Everyone piled back onto the sleigh and they set off yet again. Finally they arrived at Frosty Kingdom. "We're here," announced Grandpa Pig. Peppa saw something sparkling up ahead. As they got nearer, she gasped. "It's the Winter Castle, and there's the Snow Queen. Look, it's Miss—" "Hello, everyone," interrupted Miss Rabbit. "I'm the Snow Queen. Welcome to Frosty Kingdom." Peppa and George waved and giggled excitedly. "I wish we could stay here," said Peppa. "Peppa, this is our cabin," said Grandpa Pig. "We're going to stay here for the night." "Wow!" cried Peppa. "This is the best Frosty fairy tale adventure ever. Thank you, Granny and Grandpa." "Ho, ho, ho. You are most welcome," said Grandpa Pig, smiling. Peppa and George raced inside the cabin and looked around excitedly. "It's like we're in your story," cried Peppa. "Maybe we are," said Grandpa Pig, laughing. Peppa loved Frosty fairy tales. Everyone loved Frosty fairy tales. The